Today's episode is in part brought to you by Shortform. And welcome back to my apartment. It is really good to be back, and after a month of that miserable break down in the suburbs, I'm finally back. I am ready to get the semester break over with and to dive back into some delicious reading coming up ahead. So consider this as kind of like a housekeeping episode, TBR episode, and yeah, just an episode where I kind of like get my bearings straight after coming back to the city. So, housekeeping stuff. There are mainly three ways that I want to add value to your life. Number one is through some of these YouTube videos. And in the future, I really want to focus on the series called Book Notes. Every episode within Book Notes is basically going to be my attempt of making sense of writing or making sense of an author's arguments or making sense of something from a certain book in kind of like a video essay form. We've had an episode on Thoreau, we've had an episode on James Joyce, we've had an episode on an essay by Derrida. In these video essays, I don't want you to watch them like, oh my god, this guy has all the answers. This is very much just me trying to figure out whatever it is that I'm reading because, well, together, that's kind of like our mission here. We're trying to reinstill that passion for reading, and we're trying to get people comfortable with not being certain with a certain conclusion, and we're trying to get people excited about facing the fear of reading some of these potentially difficult books. So that's going to be the first major chunk of what's coming up ahead in the future. It's going to be a lot of these episodes on certain books that I've been reading, insights or reviews of certain pieces of literature that I've been digging into. These episodes will be more thoroughly researched and these points will be more drawn out. So look forward to that. The second way that I'm going to produce content is through personal essays on my website. Instead of posting miscellaneous things on my website, I've really decided to hunker down and to really work on this craft of the personal essay. Instead of posting once every week, from now on my blog, I'm going to post once every month. But it is going to be a very polished kind of personal essay on a specific subject. The most recent one is titled The Pleasure of Being Confused, and you can check that one out on my website. And the next one, I'm still rewriting the first draft, so stay tuned for that. So if you've signed up for the newsletter on my site, I will deliver one personal essay to your inbox every single month. And the third way, it's still a work in progress, but I'll probably announce it in the next video. It's going to be a patron-based exclusive newsletter. This newsletter right here is going to be a weekly newsletter where each week I'll give you a little update on what I'm reading, what I'm going through, and just some bite-sized advice on reading, on how to read deeper, how to take notes, or how to use plastic tabs with your books. Right now, it's still a prototype, and I'll get to that in the next video. But for this video, I simply just want to show you guys some of the things or some of the books I've been reading recently, or trying to get through recently. First one, regrettably, for school, I have to read Civilization and its Discontents by Sigmund Freud. Back in year 11, I tried to read A General Introduction to Psychoanalysis without much success, mind you. I was confused as hell without realizing that, well, that book is basically a collection of lectures by Sigmund Freud. However, this one was connected to my modernist module. And in that modernist module, we read everything from Gertrude Stein to James Joyce. And I'm really, really excited to see the connections between this book and all those other modernist classics. So expect somewhere in the future to see either a book notes episode on this book or an entire review on this book. And initially it was kind of weird to see like a work of psychology in a modernist literature unit. So I'm interested to see where this is going to take me in terms of understanding what modernism is or understanding what modernist literature stands for. So that is probably what I'm going to read over the next few days. And closing in line with literary modernism, right now I am reading Virginia Woolf's The Waves. My partner actually recommended this book, and after she's read it, she couldn't even put what she's writing to words, and that, to me, is a sign of a good book. And 2 days later, I bought myself a copy, and now I'm reading it, and I literally cannot stop. And I already have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 plastic tabs sticking out of the side. As a person who really hates marking up books, having those tabs over there is just, it's kind of a record. Virginia Woolf describes things in a certain way that at times doesn't make any sense, but if you just take a moment to reread it, you would realize that it makes perfect sense. It certainly paints very unusual pictures in your head, and sometimes it takes you a second to be like, that's what she's trying to get at. But given that this is my first Virginia Woolf ever, I'm really excited to see what this book could offer when it gets better later on. So far, the book progressed through a series of descriptions of waves clashing against the shore and a bunch of characters with their individual dialogue. And I don't have a clue where this book is going to take me. So expect more videos or more essays on this book because I'm super excited for this one. Departing from literary modernism, here are 2 books that I have to read for my American Classics unit. Number 1 is Huck Finn by Mark Twain, or The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn by Mark Twain. I haven't started it, and funny story, when I first ordered this book, the bookstore actually gave me The Adventures of Tom Sawyer instead of Huckleberry Finn. So I went back to the bookstore and said to him, do you guys actually have Huckleberry Finn? The guy's like, no, we're out of stock, so we just gave you Tom Sawyer. And I had to wait a few days to get Huck Finn back in stock, and now here it is in my hand. I haven't really read Mark Twain, that much Mark Twain, but the first line kind of made me realize that you probably don't have to read Tom Sawyer to read Huckleberry Finn. The protagonist literally said, you don't know about me without you have read a book by the name of The Adventures of Tom Sawyer, but that ain't no matter. So, is the character saying that this Tom Sawyer book doesn't really matter? Nevertheless, this is going to be a speedy read because semester starts in a few days, so I better get on with it. Next in line, Emily Dickinson's collection of complete poems. For the American literature class, my professor gave me a collection, or printouts of some poems by Emily Dickinson, and I was like, whoa, these are some of the best poems I've ever read. And I went through about 4 bookstores and landed myself a copy of the complete collection of her poems, and I think I am going to do my final paper on this one. It's hard to describe the quality of Emily Dickinson's poems, but there's a general sense of preoccupation with death and the ranging motions of using imagery and meters and contrast to really bring out that atmosphere of solemn contemplations. My favorite one out of the 12 poems that my professor gave us was probably I Felt a Funeral in My Brain. So look that poem up, I Felt a Funeral in My Brain, and read it and tell me what you think of it in the comment section down below. I'm probably going to read 2 or 3 poems every single day from this collection when I'm brewing my morning coffee, and all in all, just an incredible poet. And last but not least, a book that I'm still laboring through, an incredibly mind-boggling piece of work called Philosophical Investigations by Ludwig Wittgenstein. I first started reading this when I was 17, and obviously I didn't understand a thing. And even now I don't understand a thing. But isn't that just a general despair that you carry into a philosophical text? The possibility that you might never, ever understand what the author's talking about. Even with the Tractatus, which I never bothered with in the first place. According to this documentary that I watched on Wittgenstein, till this very day, there were endless commentaries around Tractatus Logico Philosophicus, and no one could ever agree upon a conclusion. And I remember that when a colleague asked Wittgenstein what he was writing about, when he was still alive, obviously, Wittgenstein said himself, well, I forgot half of it. So far, I'm about 40 pages into this treatise, and he is still setting up just a foundation for his argument for, language games and how language functioned. And of course, if you want to check out my video or my book notes episode on Wittgenstein, that is going to be linked in the description down below, so check that out. This will probably take another month for me to finish because it's so dense and so difficult to understand, despite the fact that it's actually quite a short treatise. And who knows what shenanigans is going to come out of this one. But I'm certainly excited. Cold coffee. Essentially, over my break in the suburbs, I discovered some of the older books that I've read when I was younger, and immediately I was confronted with the fact that I actually couldn't remember anything I've read from these books. One prominent book out of that entire pile was Homo Deus, A Brief History of Tomorrow. I only had a faint memory of reading it, and only had a faint memory of really enjoying the book, but the sad thing was, I couldn't remember half of what the book was about. Without an adequate note-taking system, it's very easy for us to forget a lot of the things that we've read or want to read. And that's where today's video sponsor, Shortform, comes in. Shortform is a platform that provides detailed studies and notes on specific nonfiction books. Categories span from business to contemporary nonfiction, all the way to stuff like craft advice for writing. So if you're the kind of person that likes to link ideas across different books or to gain an overall summary of a specific book after you've read it, Shortform is definitely the service for you. For me personally, I really enjoyed the summary for Homo Deus, the book that I talked about, and Stephen King's advice on writing. The tricky thing with Stephen King's book on writing was that most of the book was actually laced with autobiographical details. And sometimes it's difficult to extract concrete writing advice from some of these autobiographical chapters. And Shortform, in a sense, laid out all the writing advice in a very economic fashion. So if you've enjoyed on writing and you just want a partial summary of some of his writing advice, Shortform is going to list that out for you without a problem. Hence, if you want to build connections across books in your head, and if you want a reminder of what you've read a few years ago, Shortform is offering the first 500 visitors to the link in the description down below a free 5 days trial plus a discount on their annual subscriptions. So if that's what you're into, check them out in the description down below. And I want to thank Shortform for sponsoring today's video. Anyhow, that's all I have for today, some housekeeping stuff and some bookish things, and I will see you in the next video.